So I'm gonna get my prose and writing style complaints out of the way because it's not massively fair to keep harping on this 8-year-old fan fiction for not being very well written. But so I'll just try and get through it. So the thing that kept coming to mind reading is that it's Kkat's writing style just over-explains so much, and it just kills the pacing of every scene. It's like there's this bit where Pip is trying to tell Spike about Twilight's death, and rather than letting the dialogue carry the scene, every line of dialogue is just punctuated with, and I felt sad, and I felt a pang. And when are they getting to the fireworks factory? It's like I just kept feeling like that just the entire time. There's I have a couple of more egregious lines. There's my mind's eye insisted on painting an image of his words. It's like, do you really need to? Like, that's 11 words that add nothing to the story. Of course, we're imagining this in our heads.
Yeah.
Every chapter starts with the rambling monologue that serves very little purpose most of the time. If we're lucky, we get a recap. Then, if not, then it's a filler that like my editing brain wants to just cross out with a big red pen with a note that says "Show, don't tell." There's pointless melodrama that goes in circles for reasons that I will get to in the structure section. The subtext is Kkat appears to have. If you're familiar with Garth Marenghi's Dark Place,
never heard of it.
Nope.
It's a
Sorry.
It's a British comedy special thing. I'm not amazingly familiar with it either, but basically Garth Marenghi is the worst author in the world. And Dark Place is a show within the show.
Okay.
Garth Marenghi claims to be the only person who's written more books than he's read.
Oh boy.
But the line that jumps out to me is, I know writers who use subtext, and they're all cowards.
And they're all cowards! Oh no! Oh no.
And in the context of Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, this is someone asking him if like the Doctor's turning into monkeys, because it's a hospital drama. That is also supernatural elements. If the Doctor's turning into monkeys is representative of something cutting funding for health, and he's like, no, I want to ask, if we literally pay doctors peanuts, are they going to turn into monkeys? It's very silly, and I but Kkat obviously isn't this comically like bad at subtext, but does not appear to have allowed subtext to go subtextual. Anytime it's the thing that made this jump out to me is there's this bit where Zenith in Olney, she calls Calamity Winged One, and then when questioned on it, she says he's not used to being on like a name basis with anyone, and like this by itself is a neat characterization detail. It's just like that's. I can see why that makes sense, and it's kind of sad. This is Zenith has had a hard life, and then Little Pip in the narration just explains everything that was implied by that thing like a clod, just spills it all out there. It's not allowed to remain implied. It has to be only what is in the text is. It is just an annoying opportunity gone wasted to my mind, and this keeps coming up.
Yeah, it's there were certain points where Kkat had to like nail certain points to the reader over the head, especially when it came to terms. Well, okay, it's interesting because you bring up this character point by Zenith and her interaction with the world around her, but like Kkat also leaves the casual racism of Midnight Shower, like, pretty much mostly uncommented on.
I think that's less, I am leaving this in the implications because I want it to be subtextual, and more, race is hard to think about. I don't want to think about it that hard. I have. We can get to that when we talk about Glyphmark.
Sure.
Just because that's most of what there is to talk about in Glyphmark.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, my points are all going to relate to each other as I go on. I mentioned the pointless melodrama that goes in circles, didn't I?
Yes.
It's there's bits of like trying to transcribe elements of visual storytelling instead of just telling a story that works well in the medium of prose. Like this jumped out to me in the Abattoir in Arbu, where it's like it feels like, you know, rather than going with the full sense experience that, you know, we can the text would allow you to do, we spend a lot of time on just visual detail, and I just feel like that's a missed opportunity. And I guess my last point on my writing complaints is the sex jokes.
Oh yeah.
Kkat has heard that humans add jokes to their stories to lighten the mood, but has yet to figure out how they work and when to deploy them.
This is literally a point that was touched upon in the Joker movie that just came out, where Arthur Fleck is trying to understand comedy, and he has a notebook, and he's like, people laugh at sex jokes.
Oh my god, it's Kkat in a nutshell. Oh my god. Oh. It's just like every time, you know, 31 comes up, or like little Pip just in the middle of a fight for her life just decides, I'm gonna get some of that ass. It's extremely distracting.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't add levity. It's just like, Pip, what are you doing? Focus. I mean, I know like some allowances can be given to her being a horny teenager, but also, I feel like
yeah, okay. I guess talking about the bit with sorry, I had to step away a quick second for the stupid phone, which luckily was only a brief conversation. But
fair enough.
I guess talking about the bit with her like basically like exoticizing the other, like the hell out of the other of Zenith.
I wasn't getting in that deep just yet. I was just complaining about
just yet. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, it's like
I will hold the rant.
Yeah, I was just because in my complaints about subtext, I mentioned that were you there for that or?
Yep, I was.
Okay. But yeah,
I've only been gone for about 2 minutes.
Yeah, Glyphmark. We'll get to a bunch of that. But no, I was just complaining about the sex jokes in general. I mentioned that Kkat has heard that humans add jokes to their stories to lighten the mood, but has yet to figure out how they work and when to deploy them.
Yeah. I mean, I know we had this conversation earlier. I mean, that's where I was like, you know, the cons for Pip, though, is with the sex jokes, is that, like, you know, oh, homage, it says on the air, how many orgasms she gave little Pip. I guess the pro, though, is that she didn't, like, admit to cucking her girlfriend like Blackjack did to Glory in Project Horizons, you know, still, it's like, honey, what are you doing? Like, that's not funny. Like, you've now, like, engaged the entire wasteland in this really bizarre, like, BDSM relationship that no one else understands, but the 5 of you that do are like, I'm like, but why? Why is this a good idea?
Yeah, like, I don't want to get, like, too into Project Horizons here just yet, but it's kind of like that thing where Project Horizons is lots of the things from Fallout Equestria on human growth hormone. And it just takes the whole kind of exhibitionism thing. Oh my god.
Human growth hormones. You know, beaver tranquilizers and, you know, a couple anabolic steroids for good measure.
Just more.
Cat is for horses, you dumb motherfuckers.
Okay, so that's everything I had to say about Kkat's writing style. I hope that was fairly brief. If you want to add anything, I feel like this is mostly just my personal bugbear.
Well, no, I think you're right though, because like a lot of the things too, I think that I'm realizing that a lot of my commentary, like, that is kind of based around that issue as well, that you run into at a lot of different points in the story, is that, like, Pip has, like, these moments where, like, for most people, it would have been, like, this, like, psychic awakening, or like, this like, moment of like, oh, hey, I'm having a lot of cognitive dissonance about this, and I'm going to write you in the text, not make the subtext, but the text, that this is a problem, and I really should think deeply about, my life, the universe, and everything. And that's fantastic. And this is a point where, like, in the story, like, most characters should theoretically be able to sit there and be like, all right, I'm going to have this delightful thing that's called character development. And I'm going to think about this and actually try to figure out how to apply this to my life. Pip, on the other hand, sits there and, like, basically, like Jack Sparrow goes, oh, I love those moments. I like to wave at them as they pass by. And unfortunately, like that, again, this is more of a prose issue, but then it becomes really jarring for the reader when you're having these moments where you're like, oh, that's a really interesting point. Yeah, Pip should think about that. And then, like, two pages later, she's like, yeah, I kind of forgot about it already. And you're just like, I thought you were the smart one. Or is this what happens when you have, like, 18 and then play a character with 4 wisdom?
Speaking of being the smart one, in the latter half of this volume, Little Pip does repeat to herself, I am not a clever pony. Which I think
she is not.
I think this is where Somber got Blackjack's mantra of I am not a clever pony from.
Yeah, I feel like that's mostly self-disparagement.
Wait, I mean, it is self-disparagement. I mean, but a lot of times too, like, God, Pip is the points there. Pip, the difference is like, again, I guess not to go out in the weeds with Horizons, but like when Blackjack says it, she's being dumb. like okay, like, I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever seen like the Christopher Titus skit on how he defines like using the word retard with people that should have the cognitive capabilities to actually understand things. That's that. Like, she's sitting here and she's doing this dumbest crap, and you're like, Blackjack, you know better. That's a terrible plan. Why are you basically like filleting the missile? This is no, don't put the energy weapon up your nose. But whereas Pip's thing is interesting because she this is something I was actually also noting, and maybe just because I have a little bit of ADHD myself. Pip's thing is when she says I'm not a clever pony, it's when she's missing a detail on something that actually really was probably really important, but she was so focused on something else that she misses it.
Oh, yeah, I think you mentioned this
I think
in the last
that's
podcast.
the difference there.
I think you mentioned I think you mentioned the Pip has ADHD thing in the last podcast. Like I remember
I did too. Here's my like, yeah, you said you feel bad about like beating to death the prose of an 8-year-old fan fiction. I feel bad about like doing a psychological reading of an 8-year-old fan fiction.
I mean,
I'm using my English minor, but
why else are
probably
we
not
here?
the way it was ever intended.
I mean, the show's over. Go home. Oh, anyway. Basic, did you have anything to say else?
Yes.
To say, or?
Yes. While we're on the subject of bringing up our gripes with the story, boy, do I have a big fucking gripe with Volume 4. Because,
Oh boy.
because as I said, okay, the whole volume, the whole arc of this section of the story is predicated on content that we don't see. In fact, a lot of it is based on a memory orb. One memory orb that Little Pip sees on her way from Splendid Valley to, originally, they were heading to Junction R7, and then they meet up with Blackwing, and then it just cuts out. And the memory orb that Little Pip saw was of a candid meeting between Rarity, Applejack, and Rainbow Dash, where it's actually a setup for 3 things. And this is a good point for Kkat, because we can talk about writing style, but Kkat is very clever in laying down bits and pieces of like laying out the story progression. So this memory orb establishes 3 things. One, that Rarity has the Black Book in her possession, and it's in her ministry. That, and she hints that the only way to destroy it is with a mega spell. And the third is that she tried to destroy it with Spike, but it was sent to Celestia. But that point comes up later in the story. And it was during that memory orb that Little Pip came to the conclusion, okay, I know how to destroy the goddess and destroy the Black Book at the same time. I just need to convince Red Eye to move his bomb under Maripony. And that's what this whole arc is predicated on, is that one memory orb. But like, so much of the context around Little Pip's thinking of this plan is cut out that like, you don't really connect the pieces in that moment. And it all comes together in this quick epiphany at the end of the volume. So, and the reader doesn't know that, which, I mean, it's fine. It's nice to have that. There's a literary word for it. Heartshine, help me out here. It's
foreshadowing.
No, irony, dramatic irony. Where
okay. That was not the word I was thinking of. Okay,
where the protagonist sort of knows what's going on, but the audience doesn't.
I thought it was the other way around, that the audience knows something that the characters don't.
Well, we know it because we know how it all ends. But when you're first,
I'm just the definition of dramatic irony in the usual context. But
I know there's different types of literary irony. There's dramatic irony, and then there's another type of irony. I forget the word for it.
It's fine.
Yeah, everyone knows what I'm talking about. It's the type of irony where information is withheld from the audience. And that's what this whole arc is predicated on. And it's really frustrating because it just makes every single side distraction in this arc, like, why? For what purpose? Like, Old Olney was contrived, going... I mean, of course they had to recruit Steelhooves again to go to Camelot because that's necessary. But going to Arbu, oh my god, Arbu is predicated on the fact that when they're going to Buckland Cross, Calamity just conveniently sees these bandits attacking the town, a town that has never been mentioned in the story up until now, and it's a side plot that was just wholly unnecessary. And the only reason why I can fathom Arbu is a subplot that exists is because Kkat wanted to introduce this concept of Little Pip not being as good and as virtuous as she's been made out to be this whole time.
I mean, which actually, if you think about it, is kind of an interesting like thought process from like a writing perspective, because, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, Little Pip's been kind of a murder hobo. Like,
but it's been legit, somewhat justified this whole time. Somewhat justified.
It's somewhat justified, sure. But like the other side of it is, though, is that there's a lot of different things that happen in there that, you know, everybody's like, oh, she's so virtuous, she's doing all this, and it's like, okay. I mean,
are we looking at the same person?
But are we talking? Oh, are we all talking about the same person, or are we all drinking Homage's Kool-Aid? Right. Because that seems to be what's happening. And so yeah, you're right. Basically it was like, she and Steelhooves after Arbu have this really fascinating exchange where he's like, that you're just as, basically it can be summed up as in him paraphrasing is like, you're just as shitty as the rest of us, thank God. And it's like from a story perspective and a character growth perspective, that is something that actually really pushes Pip to start looking at herself. But again, this is also one of those moments where Pip starts looking at herself and then forgets about it in 5 pages. And it's like, there's that repeated thing that she keeps coming up with corrupted kindness. And it's like, yeah, maybe what you're doing isn't really working and maybe you should think about that. But she never gets to the, like, I should think about that stage. Yeah, exactly. And at that point, because of that, putting Arbu in there, basically, like, oh god, the thing that frustrated me is that, like, the entire section, especially her even trying to clear her name and that sort of thing, and all of her friends coming around her and being like, I can't believe you did this, but you did it, so you're okay. So, okay, we forgive you, is like, it kind of comes across almost as, like, having, like, the like perfect setup for like a world where an individual has like some very like strong narcissistic tendencies, and then all of their friends basically are there to support them despite the fact that they're kind of a shitty, horrible person.
Oh boy.
And the thing is that realistically, I them being pissed off at her makes a lot of sense. And like, I mean, obviously Steelhooves kind of as like taking on the more the mentor role, like makes a lot of sense there. But yeah, I like the entire diversionary arc of her like having like, I don't know, I blame Horizons for this, but like it almost feels like that, you know, what Kkat was trying to do was trying to be like, here's Arbu, which is like Little Pip's Gethsemane, but what if Little Pip, instead of like Christ, you know, being tempted by the devil in the garden and then eventually said no, what if he said, yeah, you know what, fuck it, let somebody else do this. And that's the feeling you end up with it, and it's like, but why?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I do have notes on Arbu and tone and ethics later.
You know what? Actually, we're talking about Arbu now, so let's just get into it.